Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is not a word, not an explanation, not a dramatic exit, but silence sustained by time. When you step back and stay back, you remove the emotional scaffolding she leaned on without realizing it. When you remove yourself and create real distance, the attachment system doesn't shut down, it wakes up. Human connection is wired around consistency and emotional regulation. When someone becomes a familiar emotional reference point, the brain quietly assigns them a role: safety, validation, grounding, identity, reinforcement. As long as that reference point is present, the nervous system remains relatively calm, even if the relationship is unstable. But the moment you disappear and stay gone, the system loses its anchor. That loss doesn't register immediately as pain. It often shows up first as relief or numbness. The mind says, "I'm fine," because the shock hasn't fully landed yet. As time passes, the attachment system begins scanning for the missing stimulus. The brain is predictive by nature. It expects patterns to repeat. When your presence no longer shows up where it used to, the brain experiences a prediction error. This creates unease. Thoughts start looping, not because she wants to suffer, but because the mind is trying to restore balance. The absence becomes louder than any argument ever was. Silence forces awareness. Every unanswered expectation tightens emotional focus on you, even if she tells herself she's moving on. Distance intensifies emotion because uncertainty fuels attachment more than certainty ever could. When someone knows exactly where they stand, the nervous system can relax. When they don't, it stays activated. Staying away denies reassurance, explanations, and emotional closure. That lack of clarity keeps the attachment system engaged. It searches for meaning, for mistakes, for moments it overlooked. The more time that passes without resolution, the deeper the emotional imprint becomes. You are no longer just a person, you become a question mark. And question marks dominate attention. Without your presence to regulate emotions, she has to feel what was previously diffused. Small distractions stop working. Friends help for a while, routines fill some space, but the core absence remains untouched. This is when emotional dependence becomes visible. She begins to notice how often your reactions guided her mood, how your attention stabilized her self-image, how your availability softened stress. These realizations don't come from logic, they come from contrast. The nervous system learns through loss, not lectures. Time also changes perception. When attachment activates, memory shifts. The brain prioritizes emotionally charged moments, especially those associated with safety and intimacy. Conflicts lose detail, tone softens. The attachment system isn't fair, it's protective. It pulls focus toward what feels familiar and grounding. As you stay away, your emotional value is reconstructed internally, often more powerfully than when you were physically present. This isn't fantasy. It's biology. The mind fills gaps with idealized meaning when it lacks real-time input. The longer the distance, the more internal dialogue replaces external interaction. She begins negotiating with herself. Pride argues with longing. Rational explanations battle emotional pull. This internal conflict is a sign the attachment system is fully engaged. If there were no bond, there would be no struggle. Indifference doesn't wrestle, attachment does. Staying away allows this struggle to deepen without interruption. Every time you resist reaching out, the attachment loop continues uninterrupted, strengthening emotional association rather than weakening it. Importantly, this process doesn't require manipulation. It happens naturally when a bond existed. You are not doing anything to her. You are simply not preventing her psychology from responding to loss. Presence numbs attachment awareness. Absence sharpens it. By staying away, you stop buffering discomfort and allow the emotional system to recalibrate on its own. The result is heightened awareness of what you represented, what was lost, and what cannot be easily replaced. Attachment grows strongest not in constant closeness, but in the space where something meaningful used to be and is no longer accessible. Time turns that space into pressure. Pressure forces recognition. Recognition changes emotion. And all of it begins the moment you choose distance and allow the attachment system to do exactly what it was designed to do. When you stay present after a breakup or emotional disconnect, you soften the impact without realizing it. Every message, every explanation, Every just checking in becomes a cushion that absorbs the force of separation. The emotional system never fully registers loss because you are still there in some form. That's what emotional cushioning is, remaining accessible enough to reduce discomfort while pretending distance exists. But when you truly step away and remain absent, that cushioning disappears. Time no longer has anything to soften the experience, and the emotional weight finally lands. At first, the mind resists the impact. There is denial wrapped in confidence. She may tell herself she doesn't need you, that life is easier, that freedom feels good. This isn't lying, it's protection. The nervous system avoids pain by delaying it. But without your presence to regulate emotions, that delay expires. Time strips away distractions. The moments when she would have reached out and didn't are replaced with silence. Silence doesn't distract, it amplifies. It forces her to sit with emotions she previously offloaded onto you. Staying away allows natural consequences to surface in full. The routines you supported begin to feel heavier. Decisions that once felt shared now feel isolating. Emotional reactions that were once stabilized by your responses now echo unanswered. This is not punishment, it is exposure. Exposure is how the brain learns. When the emotional system experiences the full weight of absence, it begins reassessing past dynamics. She starts noticing what you absorbed for her: stress, insecurity, uncertainty. These realizations only occur when the buffer is gone. Arguments never teach this lesson. Explaining your value never creates it. When you explain, you give the mind something to push against. When you stay away, there is nothing to argue with. Reality becomes the teacher. Time delivers the message without words. Each day of silence reinforces the same truth. You are not there to make things easier anymore. That repetition is powerful. The brain learns through consistency, and your continued absence becomes a consistent signal. As emotional cushioning fades, accountability quietly appears. She begins connecting emotions to actions. The mind replays moments not to justify, but to understand. What did I do differently? What did I overlook? What did I assume would always be there? These questions don't arise when comfort is available. They arise when discomfort has no escape route. Staying away removes escape. It forces emotional responsibility, not because you demanded it, but because time demanded it. There is also a shift in perception. When you are present, flaws are magnified through proximity. When you are gone, impact is measured through loss. The emotional system recalibrates value based on consequence. She feels the weight of days without your support, weeks without your presence, milestones without your acknowledgement. Each experience without you becomes data. Over time, that data builds a clear emotional picture. Your absence changed the emotional landscape more than she expected. Importantly, staying away does not guarantee reconciliation. It guarantees clarity. Emotional cushioning keeps people stuck in confusion, half connected, half detached. Time without contact forces a decision internally. Either she adapts fully without you, or she recognizes the cost of losing you. Both outcomes require the cushion to be removed. Growth does not occur in comfort. It occurs when comfort is withdrawn. When you stay away, you stop interfering with the learning process. You are no longer negotiating feelings or managing reactions. You allow time to apply pressure evenly and honestly. That pressure reshapes perception, deepens awareness, and exposes emotional truths that words could never reach. And it all begins when the cushioning ends and time is allowed to do what it does best: teach through experience. When time creates distance, memory doesn't stay neutral, it edits. The human mind is not designed to store experiences objectively, especially when attachment is involved. As you remain absent, the brain begins reorganizing past interactions through an emotional filter. This is where idealization starts, not because she is choosing to romanticize you, but because memory prioritizes emotional safety over accuracy. The moments that felt grounding, warm, and familiar rise to the surface. While conflict loses its sharp edges, time smooths out friction and amplifies comfort. At first, she may focus on flaws to justify the separation. This is a psychological defense. The mind searches for reasons to reduce emotional discomfort. But as days turn into weeks, justification weakens. The brain becomes less interested in protecting pride and more interested in restoring emotional balance. That's when memory shifts from analysis to longing. Small details resurface: your voice, routines, shared humor, the way you responded during stress. These memories appear uninvited because they carry emotional charge. The attachment system flags them as important. Distance increases perceived value because scarcity heightens focus. When something is always available, the mind discounts it. When it's removed, attention sharpens. Your absence transforms you from a constant into a reference point. Every new interaction is subconsciously compared to the emotional baseline you set. This comparison isn't fair, but it's automatic. New connections lack shared history. They don't trigger the same emotional shortcuts. The brain notices the difference, and that difference elevates your perceived value. Memory also becomes selective under emotional pressure. The brain doesn't replay entire arguments, it replays moments of connection. This isn't denial, it's regulation. The mind seeks stability when attachment is activated. By highlighting positive experiences, it attempts to soothe the nervous system. The more time passes without replacement comfort, the stronger this pattern becomes. You become associated with emotional safety, even if the relationship wasn't perfect. Idealization grows in the absence of contradiction. Another factor is identity reinforcement. Relationships shape self-perception. When you were present, parts of her identity were reflected through your attention, reactions, and validation. Once you're gone, that reflection disappears. The mind looks backward to reclaim it. Memories of how she felt around you, not just how you treated her, gain importance. She remembers feeling understood, desired, or anchored. Those feelings become tied to you as a symbol, increasing emotional significance. Time also removes emotional noise. Daily frustrations fade without reinforcement. Without new conflicts to feed negative narratives, the brain defaults to emotionally charged positives. Silence gives memory room to breathe. In that quiet, emotionally meaningful moments grow louder. This is why absence often feels heavier than presence. Presence includes imperfections. Absence includes imagination, and imagination fills gaps generously. Idealization doesn't mean distortion without consequence. It creates emotional momentum. The more the mind revisits positive memories, the stronger the emotional bond feels. This loop strengthens attachment because each memory reinforces the idea that something valuable was lost. The brain begins to associate your absence with discomfort and your presence with relief, even if that relief is only remembered. This contrast deepens emotional pull. Importantly, this process is not something you control once it starts. You don't need to remind her of your value. Time does that by allowing memory to work uninterrupted. Every day you stay away, the mind continues editing, comparing, and elevating. The absence becomes meaningful precisely because it isn't filled. By not reappearing to reset perception, you allow memory to build an internal version of you that carries emotional weight far beyond what words or explanations ever could. When communication stops, the mind doesn't become quiet, it becomes loud. Silence removes external input and forces the psyche inward. As long as there is conversation, even minimal emotions can be projected outward. Words act like release valves. They discharge tension, clarify confusion, and prevent emotional buildup. But when you stay silent and remain unavailable, those release valves close. The emotional pressure has nowhere to go except inward, and that is where the internal dialogue begins. At first, the silence feels manageable. The mind fills the gap with assumptions. She may tell herself you're busy, distracted, or temporarily distant. These explanations protect emotional equilibrium, but as time passes and silence remains consistent, those explanations lose credibility. The brain craves patterns, and silence that repeats becomes a pattern of its own. That pattern demands interpretation. Questions surface, not because she wants answers from you, but because her mind needs to resolve uncertainty. Internal dialogue intensifies under unresolved emotional bonds. Thoughts replay past conversations, searching for missed signals or hidden meanings. The mind examines tone, timing, and reactions. This is not obsession, it's problem solving. The brain treats emotional loss like an unsolved equation. Without new data from you, it uses old data repeatedly. Each replay deepens emotional engagement because the mind is actively working on you even in your absence. Silence also removes reassurance. Without reassurance, self-doubt grows. She begins questioning her impact, her decisions, her assumptions. Was she valued? Did she push too far? Did she misjudge your attachment? These questions do not arise when communication is open. They arise when certainty disappears. Silence forces self-examination because there is no external confirmation to lean on. The internal voice becomes louder, more persistent, and more emotionally charged. As internal dialogue continues, emotional contradictions emerge. Pride argues with longing. Logic debates emotion. One part of the mind insists on moving forward, while another replays memories and emotional cues. This internal conflict is psychologically exhausting. It signals unresolved attachment. If there were no emotional investment, silence would feel neutral. The struggle itself is evidence of emotional depth. Time magnifies this process. Each day of silence reinforces the absence of resolution. The mind expects closure, and when it doesn't arrive, it creates its own narratives. These narratives often place you at the center, not because you are manipulating, but because you are the missing variable. Silence keeps you psychologically present by keeping the story unfinished. An unfinished story occupies attention far longer than a concluded one. Internal dialogue also reshapes emotional priorities. Distractions lose effectiveness. Social interactions feel slightly off. Emotional reactions become delayed or intensified. This happens because mental energy is being redirected inward. The mind is allocating resources to process the unresolved bond. Silence turns you into an internal reference point, influencing emotions without direct contact. Importantly, breaking silence prematurely interrupts this process. When you reappear, you provide immediate emotional relief. Relief halts reflection. It soothes uncertainty before understanding forms. Staying silent allows the internal dialogue to run its course. It allows questions to deepen, realizations to surface, and emotional clarity to emerge organically. Silence is not empty. It is psychologically active. It creates space where thoughts echo, emotions confront themselves, and meaning is constructed without interference. By staying silent, you are not withholding, you are allowing the mind to engage fully with what your absence represents. And in that engagement, emotional awareness grows stronger than any explanation ever could. When you remove yourself and stop chasing clarity, the sense of control quietly shifts away from emotion and toward reality. Power doesn't come from convincing someone how valuable you are. It comes from letting life demonstrate it without commentary. When you explain, persuade, or seek reassurance, you keep the emotional dynamic alive and negotiable. You give the other person something to respond to, resist, or dismiss. But when you step back and allow time to pass without intervention, you take yourself out of the emotional debate entirely. What remains is reality, and reality is far harder to argue with. Patience is misunderstood as passivity, but psychologically it is restraint. It means resisting the urge to manage outcomes. The moment you stop trying to influence her emotions directly, you allow her experiences to speak for themselves. Each day without you becomes evidence. Not emotional evidence, not dramatic evidence, but lived experience. She feels the absence in practical ways, emotional regulation, decision making, stress management, identity reinforcement. These aren't abstract ideas, they're daily realities. Over time, reality accumulates proof in a way words never could. When people are emotionally activated, they are defensive. They protect their position, their pride, their narrative. Arguments strengthen resistance because the mind feels attacked. Explanations invite counter-explanations. But reality doesn't provoke defense. It creates recognition. There is no one to argue with when the experience itself delivers the message. Patience allows this recognition to form without pressure. The longer you stay away, the more the emotional fog clears and the more clearly consequences are felt. Time also neutralizes impulsive emotion. Immediate reactions are loud but unstable. Anger fades, relief settles, confidence fluctuates. By not reacting to these emotional waves, you avoid anchoring decisions to temporary feelings. As time passes, what remains is not impulse but pattern. Patterns reveal truth. She begins to notice what consistently feels missing rather than what temporarily felt good. This shift from impulse to pattern is where power transfers to reality. Staying away also restores balance to perception. When you are present, emotions are exchanged in real time. This can distort value because availability lowers perceived impact. Patience removes you from constant interaction and places you into contrast. Contrast is how the brain measures importance. Without you there, she compares life with you versus life without you, not intellectually, but experientially. That comparison happens naturally over time, not through persuasion. Another critical aspect is self-respect. When you don't chase, you signal internal stability. You show that your sense of worth isn't dependent on immediate validation. This isn't a performance, it's a psychological stance. People respond differently to those who don't need to be chosen to remain grounded. Patience communicates confidence without words. It shifts the dynamic from convince me to observe me. And observation always carries more weight than explanation. Reality also simplifies decisions. Emotional back and forth creates confusion and prolongs uncertainty. Patience cuts through that. With enough time, ambiguity collapses. Either her life reorganizes successfully without you, or it doesn't. Either your absence becomes manageable, or it becomes meaningful. In both cases, the answer is clearer than anything conversation could produce. Patience accelerates clarity by removing noise. By staying away, you stop trying to control the emotional narrative and allow outcomes to define it. That's where real power lies, not in reaction, not in persuasion, but in letting time and experience speak without interruption. Reality doesn't rush, doesn't negotiate, and doesn't explain. It simply reveals. When enough time has passed and emotional noise settles, the mind is forced into a decision. Distance does not leave things open forever. It applies quiet pressure that eventually demands resolution. This is the moment where time stops stirring emotion and starts shaping choice. As long as contact exists, even minimal, the psychological door remains half open. Ambiguity feels safer than commitment. But when you stay away consistently, ambiguity becomes uncomfortable. The mind cannot live indefinitely in unresolved attachment. It must move towards structure, and structure requires a decision. This decision is not impulsive. It doesn't come from loneliness or a bad day. It forms slowly as experiences accumulate. Each moment without you becomes data. The brain tracks how life functions in your absence. Emotional highs and lows are tested without your stabilizing presence. Over time, patterns emerge. She notices whether her emotional world adapts or deteriorates. That awareness becomes the foundation of choice, not fantasy, not hope, experience. Distance also removes illusion. When you're present, emotions can be mistaken for connection. Familiarity can masquerade as compatibility. Time strips that away. Without interaction, what remains is essence. The question becomes simple: does my life feel aligned without him, or does something essential feel missing? This clarity doesn't arrive through conversation. It arrives through living without the emotional reference point you once provided. If she adapts, detachment becomes real. Not forced, not performative, but settled. Emotional energy redirects. The nervous system recalibrates. Thoughts of you lose urgency. This is not indifference, it's resolution. And resolution is only possible when distance is maintained long enough for the emotional system to complete its process. Quick check-ins reset the clock. Consistent absence allows completion. If she doesn't adapt, recognition deepens. She begins to understand that what was lost wasn't just a person, but an emotional structure. Support, grounding, understanding. These aren't easily replaced. This recognition doesn't come with desperation at first. It comes with humility, the realization that something meaningful was misjudged or undervalued. From that place, reaching out becomes intentional, not reactive. This is why time creates genuine choice. Without distance, decisions are contaminated by emotion. With distance, decisions are informed by reality. She is no longer choosing between feelings, she is choosing between futures. One where your absence is integrated and one where it is corrected. Both choices are valid, but only one is authentic to her lived experience. Importantly, staying away protects your integrity regardless of outcome. You are not waiting in limbo or positioning yourself for validation. You are allowing a process to finish naturally. If she returns, it is because she understands the cost of losing you, not because she feared being alone. If she doesn't, it is because she truly adapted, not because you chased until meaning was diluted. Time doesn't guarantee reunion, it guarantees honesty. It filters out impulse, ego, and confusion. What remains is clarity, and clarity is the only foundation strong enough to support either reconnection or release. By staying away, you allow that clarity to form without interference, and you ensure that whatever choice emerges is real, sustainable, and grounded in truth. In the end, time is the force that reveals what words never can. When you step away and remain steady in that distance, you stop trying to manage emotions and start allowing truth to surface on its own. Absence removes illusion, silence exposes attachment, and patience lets reality speak without interference. What unravels is not a person, but the false certainty that comfort creates. What remains is awareness of value, of loss, of what was quietly holding everything together. Staying away is not about control, punishment, or strategy. It is about self-respect and psychological clarity. You choose not to chase, not to explain, not to soften the impact, because real understanding only forms when experience replaces argument. Time does the work you cannot do with words. It shows what mattered, what was taken for granted, and what cannot be easily replaced. And when the process completes, there is no confusion left. Either she returns with recognition or she moves forward with truth. In both outcomes, you stand grounded, no longer negotiating your worth. Because when time is allowed to speak fully, it always delivers the same result: clarity, dignity, and emotional honesty.